Hello and welcome to episode 134 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is March 9th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
So, first of all, I quickly want to start with a big thank you. Last week, we reached 5,000 subscribers here on the SAP on Azure channel. For me, that is another amazing milestone after reaching episode 100. So, thank you so much for watching, providing feedback via the comments, LinkedIn, Twitter, email, and coming up with new ideas. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe, like, and share. So one of the questions that we got in several of the comments of our videos was about SAP Business One, especially how you can extend and integrate your Business One system with Azure services like Logic Apps. I have to admit that I have never worked with a Business One system. I found a few nice slides and documentations, but nothing really helpful for me. So today, I'm really happy to have Richard Duffy and Moshe Nachman joining us. Both of them are experts in Business One, and Moshe has actually also published some great blog posts on how to do exactly this integration and extensions. And they are here to share their wisdom with us. So before we hand over to them, as always, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And actually, Goran, this was on our list for some time, but now we have time to actually quickly go over it.
Yeah, NetApp is always a kind of topic, Azure NetApp, interesting for the SAP customer. It's a nice blog from Gert about having HANA with multiple partitions. So meaning HANA has the different data files, and generally they would be put on one volume, but sometimes in a big database, you might want to or need to put also distribute across the different volumes. So they are kind of just explaining how to do it and how to use this application volume groups actually. So here only you can see that they are kind of showing, okay, there is a data 1, data 2, data 3, and 4. So to say they all have a different IP addresses. And basically they would be through the application volume groups, they would create a different separate volume, right? Which would of course give also enough performance. Yeah. So quite, I mean, as from Gert, very nice and useful stuff. Yeah. And another one was about just a bit continuation about this, the Azure monitoring for the SAP. And they're just talking about how to configure the secure communication. So generally, if you look on a picture, they would use two ways to connect to the SAP control service. That would be one source of the information, another one connection to the ABAP system via the RFCs. And then it's about, how to configure SSL certificates, and then don't want to travel, but generally security is as always and super important topic. People want to have a secure communication from those agents to the SAP, and this is just kind of more emphasize how to do it. Yeah, quite useful.
Perfect, cool. So with this, let's focus on some AI-related topics. And again, ChatGPT is everywhere. And Sudeep Ghosh just published a blog post on ChatGPT integration with S4 HANA 2 days ago, and it already has almost 15,000 views. So you can clearly see there's a lot of hype. But I actually think the scenarios is pretty cool that he's describing. So he's basically looking if there's an incoming email. He's using a Logic app to trigger a flow, basically, to take a look at the email, use ChatGPT to extract the relevant context, and then uses again Logic app to look up some APIs in the SAP system to retrieve, for example, some sales specific information, like if there's an email, what about my sales order? And then he uses ChatGPT to look up the relevant, or to extract the content of this email, look up relevant information on the sales order in the SAP system, and then reply with an email. And it's a nice simple scenario. He also created a video that talks about this scenario. So I thought it's just amazing all the ideas that are currently popping up also really from the community. I keep in mind this is really not from SAP or Microsoft. This is really I don't know, a freelancer or some non-connected SAP Microsoft person who's developing these integrations. So it's really fascinating to see what's coming there from the community. If you look at what Microsoft is doing, and I just came back yesterday, we had again our roadshow, Power Platform and SAP, where I also talked a little about Power Platform and the different AI services. And for me, it's just amazing what's also happening in this area. And here, Richard Riley just talks about some of the things that are now embedded into the Power Platform. And there's a new thing called Conversational Booster in Microsoft Power Virtual Agents, which is absolutely impressive. So you just provide a URL to a website, basically, and then virtual agent queries this website, and then you can interact and have a natural conversation with this website, basically. So I was in Cologne, so I obviously used the Cologne website as a foundation, and then I could ask, well, what should I do tonight? And it came up with some ideas on and restaurants and bars and stuff like that in Cologne. So it was pretty cool. The other thing is the extension of the AI builder. So there are new functionalities in the built-in AI builder for the Power Platform, and you can just see that there's so much happening in the Power Platform that it will be a very interesting year 2023 for all the AI-related releases in the Power Platform. Again, there are a few videos there that outline or that quickly talk about these scenarios, so I think definitely worth watching. Now, one other thing that we typically don't talk about, but I just think that there's so much potential that we're seeing there, which obviously also then applies to the SAP system, is the integration, again, of these AI technologies in Dynamics 365. So there's this blog post where Charles Lamanna talks about Microsoft Dynamics 365 Copilot, a Copilot that helps you in your daily work when you work with Dynamics 365. And I mean, it's again, writing an email or extracting a summary of an email and making this available in Dynamics 365, but also creating processes and flows that help you to interact better with your Dynamics 365 system. So I know this has nothing to do with SAP, but this for me is definitely an inspiration of what we can also do within SAP system here when we now start to infuse OpenAI or ChatGPT or GPT, large language models in general, into the SAP systems. So with that, just a few news, and again, I'm really excited about all the AI stuff that is currently happening. I'm sure not everything will work out as expected, but I definitely see a huge opportunity to work with AI and the SAP systems. And honestly, I don't know, maybe this is also a topic for Business One, but let's talk about this. So Richard, Moshe, it's really great to have you on the call. So maybe before we get into the Business One details, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'll go first. For those of you who don't know me, which is probably a lot of you, my name's Richard Duffy. My background, just to establish my bona fides as a expert, is that I was been working with SAP Business One since 2003. Joined SAP in 2003 in Australia. That's why I've got this stupid accent. To launch SAP Business One into Australia, then was responsible for the product in Asia Pacific, including launching the product in India, and then progressively worked my way through my layers of incompetence inside SAP until I ended up on the global management team for SAP Business One, and used to travel the world as the global product evangelist. Training partners on SAP Business One, and along the way managed to build a fairly strong following with a library of content on YouTube. If you look for Richard Duffy and SAP Business One, do a Google search, you'll find I'm like a plague on the internet. I have a YouTube channel with almost 2 million views these days, lots of training videos on SAP Business One and all that kind of stuff. Prior to that, but just total full disclosure, I was a Microsoft employee I was involved with the Dynamics product line. There and still is a product called Dynamics GP, which used to be called Great Plains. I was a Great Plains partner here in Australia. I was one of the first partners selling the product here. So one of my previous managers once referred to me as an ERP dinosaur. I've been in the ERP space since dinosaurs roamed the earth. So again, now I'm back in the Business One world, and I run my own Business One cloud hosting company, where we host customers running SAP Business One all over the world on SAP HANA, and also, of course, on Microsoft SQL Server, which, interestingly enough, we have more customers on SQL Server than we do on HANA. That's probably a legacy thing, but the great thing about SAP Business One these days is that, of course, pretty much anything you can do with HANA and the service layer, you can now do with Microsoft SQL Server and the service layer. And of course, there's Microsoft technologies right throughout the stack. But we can get into the nitty-gritty of all of that either today or, again, people should feel free to reach out to me and interact, because I'm, as you'll probably figure out, I find it very easy to talk about all things SAP Business One and technology, and particularly from a small and mid-sized business perspective. So that's a little bit about me.
Perfect. Thanks, Richard. And before we hand over to you, Moshe, it's interesting. So you started with Microsoft and switched to SAP. Actually, Robert, Goran, and we started at SAP and we switched over to Microsoft. So
it's a very incestuous industry that we live in. That's why I always say never annoy anybody you work with, because you never know when you're going to find that they're your boss. So, it's a good thing.
Cool. So Moshe, what about you?
Okay, I'm less interesting than Richard. Originally from Israel, and actually I started my way from the business side as a manager in organizations, and I've been around SAP mostly with the enterprise implementations. The SAP ECC, the R3, and then worked my way up to the S4 HANA. So I started as a key user in an organization as a manager. And as a manager, where you need to constantly reach to IT guys and ask for stuff. And you know about this, Holger, you're trying to ask for something and then they say that it's going to get into the roadmap and they do it in 1 year. So I started taking matters into my own hands, and I started developing applications for my teams. And then I became an ABAP developer for the ECC environment. And actually, I've been around SAP Business One. I've been doing SAP Business One in the past 2.5 years. So it's not been a long time ago since I've started with SAP Business One. But I'm glad that I came into that arena, because I found myself in a position where I need to provide solutions to smaller organizations, to smaller companies, where S4HANA or ECC is just an overkill. So I started from day one on the cloud. It was exactly at the point where everybody started shifting to the cloud and talking about the cloud. So I started on the cloud here in Europe, and today I live in Europe. And I ended up wrapping the SAP Business One with all the SAP native services, and of course Azure and Microsoft. So today the Power Platform and Azure Logic Apps and the entire Azure platform services is as an iPaaS and even as a SaaS offering is very important, a very important aspect of what I do on a daily basis with SAP Business One. And of course I met Richard because he is so famous. And we started talking, and it's been a roller coaster since then. I mean, I've learned a lot from him, and it's a very interesting period in time where we have to, and thank you for having us. I think it's a remarkable opportunity to speak about Business One.
Perfect, and thank you. And actually, as we talked before briefly, I am completely. I have never touched a Business One system, and we got these questions from customers from time to time. How can I extend? How can I integrate in Business One? And I always had to say, and there was these very basic questions also. are there BAPIs in Business One? And I had to tell, look, I don't know. I have never connected to a Business One system. And then when you got me excited, I looked up some numbers, and there was a number from 2018, I think, an official from SAP, where it said we reached 60,000 customers already. And I think in the meantime, I found a few. I didn't found official numbers from SAP, but I think we're way over 70 or 80,000 customers, which
85.
I was completely unaware of, to be honest. I mean, this is huge. This is not a small business. So I was really surprised, actually.
SAP's best kept secret. It's one of those things, and as somebody who used to work inside SAP, it used to drive us crazy, because SAP can only talk about the size of customers, the number of customers using SAP ERP platforms being so large because of SAP Business One. And the amazing thing about SAP Business One as well is it's incredibly sticky. So renewal rates, things that are near and dear to a software vendor's heart, but really, customers could care less about. Renewal rates are incredibly high with SAP Business One. I think, maybe around 95 or 96% people just pay their annual maintenance every year. And the reason for that is that the product is so rich in functionality and continues to grow. And and I'm sure Moshe will share this experience as an SAP Business One focused person, the biggest frustration we have is that what a lot of people don't realize is that every time SAP come out and they start talking about all these fabulous things that you could do with S4 HANA and all these fabulous things you can do with the business technology platform, SAP Business One, you can do all of those things with the SAP Business One platform. And that's one of the things that Moshe has been doing very, very successfully, and to a certain extent, hidden in the shadows. But this is with 80,000 customers, it's hard for the vendor to know what all of those customers are doing with their technology. But as a cloud provider, we facilitate the customers doing those things. And it's just amazing what is happening. And of course, on the integration side, from day one, I think, SAP placed a big focus on being able to have the large enterprise customers being able to deploy a full SAP footprint in all of their organizations. So early on in the piece, there was it used to be called SAP Business One Integration for SAP NetWeaver. Of course, SAP is great at providing great big long names and then giving them short acronyms like B1ISN. Yes, so B1ISN, it enabled customers to deploy SAP Business One into their ecosystem, and that people are still doing it today, still using that same technology, as well as, of course, all of the new technologies. And there are literally thousands of large enterprise customers today who use SAP Business One in their smaller subsidiaries and so on and so forth. And there are other SAP products as well, some of them less successful than SAP Business One, which we won't talk about. But, some of those products are also out there, but SAP Business One by far and away is the product that has the largest footprint of any SAP product in terms of number of customers. It's a great thing that all these technologies are available inside SAP. That's why I like what Moshe's been doing, and on the SAP Business One community, which is a website that I put together, an independent website that I put together. He's been writing those blogs and sharing his knowledge. It's just amazing the number of customers out there who are doing incredible things with the technology.
Richard, before we go, and I definitely want to spend some time on the integrations, obviously, but before we go there, for someone like me who has never touched a Business One system, you already said there's a SQL Server version, there's a HANA version. For me as a customer, is there a difference? I mean, from a functionality point of view, from an integration point of view, and also just to answer this stupid question, are there BAPIs? How is it working?
Okay, so the way to look at SAP Business One is that it is one application that whether you're on Microsoft SQL Server or HANA. Now, I won't talk about how it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Let's just talk about the now, where it's effectively the same product. There are a few things that are a little bit different when you're using SAP HANA, and that's with some of the things like the integrated and embedded analytics that come from SAP HANA, because it is an in-memory database, and analytics are just a standard part of the solution. But the integration technologies, the service layer, which is the mechanism by which external applications can form loosely coupled connections to SAP Business One, it is available in both SQL and HANA. The mobile applications that are available, both SQL and HANA.
Okay.
The biggest difference between the two is that in the traditional user interface, there is a new Fiori style user interface if you're using HANA, but there's now a brand new, well, not brand new, it's been around for about 2 or 3 years now, an SAP web client that actually gives you exactly the same UI. And for those of you who are familiar with S/4HANA, the latest iteration of the UI standards is called Horizon. And so with the SAP Business One web client, it's built using all the same Fiori Horizon standards. So, you know, to all intents and purposes, to your average user, they wouldn't know if it's HANA or SQL, or what a HANA or SQL actually is, apart from a bunch of letters stuck together to form something that they don't really understand. Although there's a lot of very good technical people out there in the Business One world as well. I don't mean to poo-hoo that. That's why there are so many people doing cool stuff with the service layer. So, you know, those APIs, those RESTful APIs are all published and securely made available to any SAP Business One customer that wants to deploy it. Matter of fact, when you've deployed that service layer, you go to the service layer base URL, and the first thing it gives you is actually all the documentation with all the APIs and then examples of how to call those APIs if you want to retrieve data, if you want to execute queries, if you want to push sales orders in, if you want to do something with the purchase order, or process, you know, an inventory transfer, or do a stock inquiry. All of those things are just a given with the SAP Business One application. And like I said, a lot of customers just don't realize it, but small and mid-sized enterprises tend to be a little less focused on those things, because for them it's all about, look, I've got this ERP product, it's a tool, it helps me do my job every day, and that's all I use it for. But the message that I would like to give everybody is that don't think that if you need to do something cool, if you wanted to take that example that you had in that blog post of utilizing the Power Applications and using ChatGPT, unplug where it said S/4HANA and plug in SAP Business One, and it'll work.
Cool.
So that's the key. You know,
perfect.
It's there used to be a song, anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you. It's kind of like a little bit the same with SAP Business One. Don't think that just because it's for small and mid-sized enterprises, you can't make it stand on its head and do tricks. It's amazing.
And I think what you said, that Business One is also adopting the Horizon theme, I think that fits also very well in this statement that you said, that a lot of enterprise customers, they are using S4, they maybe for their corporation, for their big implementation, for their global systems basically, but some of the subsidiaries, they could then use Business One. I guess there's a nice integration, obviously, also from Business One into S4. And then still the user experience using the Horizon theme is probably similar. So if someone then transitions, maybe, I guess that's also a common scenario, that you outgrow your Business One system and then you switch over to S4. Not sure.
It's not a common scenario. It's certainly something that SAP do like to talk about a lot about. But, you know, I think one of the things that SAP management have realized over the last year or two is that, you know what, S/4HANA is great, but the Business One ecosystem and the partners and the customers are just, well, sticky is not a good word. Well, yeah, let's use the word sticky. They love the solution. They don't want to move. So a lot of them get a little bit tired of being, you know, you've got to look at this, you've got to look at this, you should look at this, because they go, well, everything I need to do, I can do with what I already have. From a vendor's perspective, it's a little bit frustrating, but there's always that section of customers who will need to grow. But I think it's less than what people might think.
Okay.
And I think that
And
also
now I'll get a bunch.
I'll
get a bunch of emails from SAP saying, "Why did you say that, you bad person?" Sorry, Moshe.
Moshe.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to straighten that point and saying that I'm working closely with customers, and I see even bigger customers today who qualify for S/4HANA implementations, and even the God rest its soul, the BYD. And they still elect to use Business One and just extend the system. It's like the first natural choice before it becomes an overkill, because the companies they actually pay attention to those things today. I'm talking about large corporations.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then obviously the big question is the integration. I mean, now I have maybe I'm a small startup or I'm a smaller mid-sized company and I've selected Business One. Everything is working great. But then exactly what you just said, Richard, maybe then ChatGPT comes in, or maybe even more real case scenario that I need to interact, that I need to exchange data with other systems. Moshe, I think that's where you have created some of your beautiful blog posts where you talk about eventing, where you talk about how you can integrate this in Logic apps. So what would be a good starting point, or what can you tell us about that?
I think that with the time that we have today, maybe we should cover the first blog post I've written about events, because I think, Olga, in one of your oldest videos, you discussed about how you can consume events from S/4HANA on top of the BTP with the BTP event mesh, and then you connect it to the event grid on Azure. So you have to go through a lot of steps down the road to get to the point where you can actually consume events. So maybe I can mention a little bit about one of the integration components, the standard integration components of SAP, which is called the B1IF, or the integration framework. I'm gonna just quickly share my screen so we can take a look at that blog post. So let's just take this part. I think the first choice today, when we're talking about cloud implementations of organizations, they also look at the cost perspective. So if we want to look at a SaaS offering, which is consumption-based model on Azure, for example, you don't want to constantly pull an endpoint or check an endpoint. So you want to potentially listen to events. So I think that what I've done here is it's kind of a big ball of mush where it takes several components of the SAP Business One and leverage an event from the SAP Business One integration framework to Azure. And then we can potentially grab that payload and do something with it with the service layer. So just before I get into the blog, maybe we can quickly show what Richard was mentioning, which is actually the service layer API.
Nice.
So, so you were mentioning BOPs. So there aren't any BOPs here. This is not something that like we do on the ECC or on top of the S/4HANA we're calling a BOP. But it's much a lightweight interface that we can use, and we have a very, very well documented API that we can just use. We can consume Business One objects. We can create transactions. We can query the database. So there's a pretty much it's like limitless. The land of possibilities when it comes to dealing with manipulating SAP Business One. So the SAP Business One service layer, I think Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, it's available from SQL. On SQL, it's from version 10, feature pack 2105, and for HANA, I can't remember, but it's actually it's been there since day one. And we can use it. I'm just going to show exactly how we can do that. But let's go back to the blog post before then. So the integration framework is an integration component that we install once we install the cloud environment. It could be also an on-prem, but we're not discussing an on-prem today. So it's just a very, very simple scenario that we can potentially see. This is a web-based IDE that the integration framework has. So we can potentially look at, we have a hierarchical view here where we can access all the integration artifacts and basically manage the entire integration from here. So the first thing that I would like to do is to listen to an event. So I'm just selecting an atom here, and I'm saying, just listen to a business object number 13, which is an AR invoice. So whenever an AR invoice is either changed or added or deleted, just send me a notification. So the integration framework of SAP has its own built-in event sender, which we can configure, and then we can leverage the events coming from the event sender to the integration framework. And from there, we can do pretty much whatever we want. In this case, I'm just taking an invoice event, and I'm using, I can even do an XSL transformation. So this tool was initially designed for SAP consultants. Later on, we kind of figure out that it's a little bit more high-level usage. It requires knowledge in XSLT transformations, but this is why I'm trying to limit the use of the integration framework and only use it to, in this case, to fetch an event. So I'm just taking that event and I'm using an atom that is a built-in atom to just call an API on Azure. So in this case, I'm just fetching the payload that is coming from the DI API of the or from the service layer of SAP, and I'm just I've set up an API on Azure here, and on that API, I have my own URL. And I'm just using that URL to connect it to the integration framework. So in this case, that will be my webhook here. So I will just go and I will set up all the parameters here. And once the event comes in, it just fires the payload into Azure in an XML format. And then even on Azure, once it comes in, I can take that payload and I can use, for example, in this case, I'm using policies to convert an incoming payload from XML to a JSON, because the service layer likes to talk in JSON. So here in this case, I'm taking the XML incoming message and I'm converting it to a JSON object. And once we can even go and look at, we can even go to the back end and see the logic app and see the runtime of the logic app. And we can see how it looks like when it comes into the logic app from the from the B1 integration framework. So I'm just getting, in this case, I just wanted to get the doc entry. So if we go back to the solution, we can see that the XSL transformation, I did a very simple thing. I just went and I said, give me the doc entry from the payload. But I can potentially take whatever I want. If I go to the monitor and I look at the incoming payload here, so I can see that the incoming payload shows much more. I can take every piece of information that I want from that invoice, from that incoming invoice, and I can just parse it, send it to Azure, take an XML, turn it into JSON, and then once I have it here on Azure, I can use the service layer and potentially create other objects. For example, in this case, I'm not going to get into how we connect to the service layer because it's just getting too much technical. But we can potentially get into the service layer. We can use that API reference to do other stuff and create loops and enrich the data and further call other objects. So it's just a very, very small example, this blog that tells you how to grab the event. And instead of going all the steps on the BTP, which will probably be an overkill for a very, very small company in terms of the pricing tier, just wait and wait for that event, grab that event, and then use that event in order to do something with the SAP Business One service layer. In SAP.
No, that's really cool. And actually, I'm positively very much surprised on the list of APIs that you have there, that you can easily subscribe basically to events via the integration framework, and even the integration framework looks like a really cool tool actually to connect to create some flows, and then, as you said in your example, then call a webhook on, in your case, from Azure API management, but potentially obviously from other tools as well. So I think it looks like the idea of extensibility of Business One has always been there, or has been there for a long time, and that helps, I guess, to really integrate Business One into an existing landscape and extending Business One with other tools as well.
So one of the things that I mentioned before, as I talked about the fact that the integration between SAP Business One and the SAP for large enterprises, be it ECC, whatever the case may be, it was originally built utilizing the Business One integration framework. So people who are doing that today, that's how all of that was done. And so those adapters were already pre-built to allow you to plug straight into your ECC environment. Obviously, it's a lot easier now if we're all using RESTful APIs. We're all using those newer technologies. But what you're seeing there when Moshe is showing you the Business One integration framework, that's exactly what the tool was that the integration between SAP Business One and ECC was all built on.
Cool.
We can potentially go to, there's two versions to the integration framework. We have version 1 and version 2. Version 1 is less user-friendly. I prefer to work with version 2 because it gives you a much better web-based IDE. But if we go to version 1, where most of the setup is being done, we can easily see how we can subscribe to events. So we just go to the event center here, and the event center setup allows us to say which objects we would like to listen to. So there's a very, of course, we need to type in all the connection and parameters, but once we get past that, we can go, and we have a very easy way to filter the objects we want to listen to. So we just provide the object IDs, and we can just easily subscribe to an event and get the event. And like you saw, we just take the payload, we parse it and leverage it on Azure or a Power Platform or a Power App, whatever we choose to do.
So when I look at S4, for example, there's the SAP API Business Hub, where all the APIs are documented that are publicly available. Is there something similar for B1, or would you just, which is maybe potentially even better, would you just go to this root URL that you showed, where you have the list of all the APIs, and then you can immediately see what is available in my system? You can probably test it directly in your system. Just wondering, if there's a central place, or is it built in each and every system?
At the end of the day, it's an endpoint you call. So the service layer API allows you to just connect to the system very easily. You just send a connection string, and you get a cookie back from the service layer, and you use that cookie in order to, for like in this example, in this case, my flow from the integration framework, once this webhook is activated, it just, and this flow is triggered, then it calls another flow, and this other flow is actually the login to the service layer.
Oh, okay.
So this flow, let's just go and see that flow.
Might just while you're doing that, let me just quickly, maybe I'll just answer your question directly, Holger. The answer is yes. You just go to the endpoint, and which usually sits on port 50,000. So you type in the endpoint URL port 50,000, and the first thing you see is all the documentation of all the APIs.
Cool.
So anybody who has got the service layer installed, the documentation is automatically there. And that's how we actually test that the service layer is installed correctly. You just go to that URL. If the documentation comes up, you've got a working platform. Yep. Sorry, Moshe, back to you.
No, it's okay. So this flow actually returns a cookie, And I'm using that cookie in order to, there's something we call sticky session.
Mhm.
So when we set up the service layer, we set up a sticky session, so we don't need to log in each time we want to make an API call to the service layer, and we use that cookie in order to make subsequent calls. So in this case, I'm just using something that I get from my Azure API, and I'm calling a specific sales order here. And I'm using that cookie, and then I can take that sales order and I can do other stuff and inside of Azure, inside of a Power App, whatever it is, whatever I choose to do, as long as I get something from my system. So the connection is pretty straightforward. You don't have to go through the motions in order to connect.
Cool. Well, fantastic. I think that's a really, really great overview, and especially for me, who has no knowledge about Business One, I think it's very clear now where I would get started to look at the integration points. I also like the port 50,000. I mean, coming from the NetWeaver area and NetWeaver portal and stuff like that, port 50,000 is always the default also for your NetWeaver system. So that also feels immediately very familiar, which is good. Yeah, and I think I should definitely take a closer look at the integration framework, or it looks like this is really the central point to integrate into Business One.
Well, there's I mean, if you think about it, there is the integration framework, but from a loosely coupled environment, a lot more people now are building utilizing the service layer. And Moshe touched on the reason why. Originally, when the Business One integration framework was built, you know, I, as a Business One evangelist, would run around saying, "Oh, yes, it's a tool that you, as a consultant, you should learn how to use it." And we quickly realized that it was beyond the capabilities of your average ERP consultant, who's great at building a GL chart of accounts, who can set up a business process flow for your accounts receivable, invoicing, and stuff like that. But you know, building XSLT transforms and stuff like that was beyond most of them. So, you know, I think one of the things that we'll see is a lot more people wanting to adopt some of the tools that Moshe has talked about, the things that are available with these low code or no code. I mean, as soon as you have to write a script, you're no longer no code.
Yes.
So I don't believe in this concept of no code. I think it's a marketing construct, but anyway, you know, more people will be using the service layer, but like Moshe has given that example, you use the B1I to do that event capture. And that's really where it kicks in. And you know what, here's the thing, every Business One customer, when they've paid for their licenses, they have access to all these tools. So it's not like, it's unusual. It's not like the vendor is going to put their hand out and say, "More money, please. You now want to start using these tools. You've got to give us more money. You want to buy 50,000 API calls? Please give us more money." It's just there, and you can start using it.
Well, fantastic. Richard, Moshe, I think that was, again, for me, a fantastic getting started guide. 101 on Business One. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your input. And Moshe, I'm really looking forward for additional blog posts. And Richard, I'm sure I'll take a few looks at the videos that you have published. We're not at 2 million views yet, but maybe over time, our channel will also evolve and get there at some point in time, maybe.
Our pleasure.
So, thank you so much for having you, or for joining us. And I'm really looking forward where this whole B1 integration with Azure services is going. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much. Have a great day. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks. Bye-bye.